Pierce Brosnan, at 72, is a man the world still recognizes, instantly elegant, charismatic, the kind of timeless presence who made audiences believe in heroes shaped by grit and quiet charm. But behind the familiar smile is a life carved deeply by heartbreak, a life so profoundly marked by loss that even fame could never soften the edges of his grief. Long before the world celebrated him as James Bond, Pierce had already lived through tragedies that would define him far more than any role. He lost his first wife, Cassandra Harris, to ovarian cancer, a woman who had been his anchor, his guide, and the heart of his early life. Years later, the same illness took their daughter Charlotte, repeating the very nightmare he once thought he would never endure again. And woven between these losses are the struggles of his stepson, Christopher, whose path has been marked by difficulty and distance. And so, when we look at Pierce Brosnan's life, we're not just tracing the path of a famous actor, we're stepping into the quieter spaces where love, loss, and resilience shaped the man behind the image. These are the moments he carried long after the cameras stopped rolling, the memories that shaped his heart more deeply than any role ever could. It is here, in the soft shadows of his private grief, that we begin to understand the strength it takes to keep moving forward, and the hope he somehow found after so much was taken from him. Long before the fame, before the tailored suits and cinematic elegance, Pierce Brosnan was simply a young man carrying the weight of a complicated childhood. Born on May 16, 1953, in Drogheda, Ireland, he grew up surrounded by long stretches of absence. His father gone, his mother working far from home, and the quiet resilience of a child learning how to stay steady without the comfort of a traditional family. Those early years carved a longing in him, a deep ache for warmth and stability, the kind many experience as a given. It made him gentle, observant, and achingly aware of how fragile a sense of home could be. By the time he arrived in London chasing the uncertain path of an actor, he carried that longing with him, and in 1977 fate rewrote everything. That was the year he met Cassandra Harris, the Australian-born actress whose beauty, confidence, and grounded spirit seemed to quiet every restless corner of his life. Their connection was immediate but not rushed, steady, warm, and deeply human, the kind of bond that feels less like discovery and more like recognition. Cassandra brought with her a life already rich with responsibility. 2 children, Charlotte and Christopher. But to Pierce, they weren't an obstacle, they were a gift. He understood their needs instinctively, shaped by the gaps in his own upbringing. He stepped into their world not to fill a role, but to become a steady presence. When their biological father passed away, Pierce adopted both Charlotte and Christopher, an act that reflected not obligation, but love, a quiet promise to be the father he never had. In 1980, Pierce and Cassandra married, sealing a love that had already begun transforming him from the inside out. Their home became a place of warmth and shared purpose, a refuge from the unpredictability of an actor's life. And soon, that love expanded again. Together they welcomed a son, Sean, a moment that deepened Pierce's sense of family even further. Holding his newborn son, he felt the kind of completeness he had once believed belonged only to other people. It was as if every fractured piece of his childhood finally settled into place. Becoming a father of 3 reshaped him. It softened him, grounded him, and gave him a sense of direction that went far beyond career ambition. Charlotte and Christopher trusted him. Sean needed him. And Cassandra, strong, radiant Cassandra, was the emotional center that held them all together. Their family wasn't defined by blood alone, it was defined by the everyday tenderness that binds people with intention and love. Their life at home was simple in the most beautiful way: shared meals, whispered reassurances, late-night conversations about the future. To Pierce, this was the real beginning. Long before the world came to know him as a star, he was learning how to be a father, a husband, and a man who finally knew where he belonged. Looking back, this chapter of his life wasn't about fame. It was about healing, about building a family, where love filled every room, where responsibility became devotion, and where a young man who once felt alone in the world found everything he once wished he had. It was the beginning of a life defined not by spotlight but by love. For a long time, Pierce Brosnan believed he had finally found the kind of life he once dreamed about. A home filled with laughter, a partner he adored, and 3 children who had turned him from a lonely boy into a devoted father. But life has a way of testing even the strongest hearts, and Pierce would come to learn that love, no matter how deep, sometimes walks hand in hand with heartbreak. In 1987, Cassandra Harris, the woman who steadied his world, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. It was a word that changed everything in an instant. Cassandra had always been the bright, commanding force in their home, the one who made life feel grounded and whole. Watching her health fade was like watching the center of his universe dim day by day. Pierce became her caregiver, not out of obligation but out of a love that had shaped every corner of their lives. He was by her side through every treatment, every quiet night of fear, every moment when the children looked to him for strength he wasn't sure he had. Those 4 years became a long, painful lesson in holding on, while learning to let go. And on a quiet December day in 1991, Cassandra passed away. Pierce lost his partner, his anchor, and the mother of their children. The grief was overwhelming, but he knew that Charlotte, Christopher, and Sean needed him more than ever. So he carried the heartbreak quietly, holding his family together one day at a time, even as he felt himself breaking inside. But tragedy does not always end when the world expects it to. After Cassandra's death, her son Christopher struggled deeply. Addiction and personal battles shaped his young adulthood. A painful reflection of the internal wounds left by losing his mother so young. Pierce never stopped caring, never stopped hoping for him. But some journeys unfold slowly, weighed down by the shadows grief leaves behind. And then, the unthinkable happened again. In 2013, their daughter Charlotte, bright, compassionate, and so much like her mother, was diagnosed with the same illness that had taken Cassandra. Ovarian cancer had returned to their family, not as a memory, but as a haunting repetition of everything Pierce once prayed he would never face again. Watching Charlotte fight the same disease that claimed her mother was a grief so heavy, it almost defies language. He had already lived this nightmare once. Now he was living it again, not as a husband, but as a father who could do nothing but stand beside his daughter and hold her hand through every fragile moment. When Charlotte died in 2013, it felt as though time folded in on itself, carrying him back to 1991, to the hospital room where he lost Cassandra. He had survived one loss, only to be asked to survive another. And still, somehow, he had to keep breathing, keep moving, keep comforting the family that remained. His smile in public became a shield. Behind it lived a man who had carried more sorrow than he ever allowed the world to see. In these years, Pierce Brosnan's story became something deeper than loss. It became proof of how a broken heart can still keep beating for the people who remain. Even in the midst of sorrow, Pierce continued, not as someone untouched by loss, but as a man driven by the quiet power of love. After years of unimaginable loss, Pierce Brosnan's life could have remained shrouded in grief. But even in the shadow of sorrow, there is room for renewal. And for Pierce, that renewal arrived in the form of love, family, and purpose. In 2001, he married Keely Shea Smith, a journalist and filmmaker, whose presence brought a quiet steadiness into his world. Keely was not simply a partner, she became the anchor that allowed him to breathe again, to trust in joy after decades of heartbreak. Their love was gentle, unassuming, yet transformative, a healing force that seeped into every corner of his life. Together they built a family that honored the past while embracing the possibility of the future. Dylan and Paris, their 2 sons, were born into a home where warmth, stability, and emotional openness were not aspirations but daily realities. Pierce had learned from his earlier life the fragility of what is taken for granted, the urgency of love, the necessity of being present, and he carried those lessons into fatherhood with Keeley by his side. Their home was filled with laughter, curiosity, and the subtle, enduring reassurance that even after loss, life could be rich and beautiful. Pierce's resilience was not only personal but also profoundly public. The pain of losing Cassandra and Charlotte inspired a commitment to advocacy, particularly in women's health and cancer awareness. Through interviews, charity work, and campaigns, he lent his voice to causes that had forever changed his life. It was an act of remembrance, a way to honor those he had lost, and a demonstration of how personal tragedy can fuel meaningful action. His work reminded the world that grief can be a catalyst for purpose, and that hope is often found in lifting others even while carrying your own burden. Even as he continued to act, Pierce approached his career differently after these tragedies. His choices reflected a balance between passion and presence, a desire to create stories without sacrificing the family he had fought so hard to protect. Each role became a way to channel emotion rather than escape it. Each public appearance an opportunity to show that strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the courage to live fully despite it. In this way, his professional life became intertwined with his personal resilience, each feeding the other in quiet, meaningful ways. Life with Keeley and their sons also allowed him to revisit the simple joys that had been overshadowed by loss. Family vacations, small celebrations at home, quiet evenings filled with conversation. These ordinary moments became extraordinary precisely because he understood their fragility. For Pierce, the presence of love, laughter, and routine was itself a form of hope, a gentle counterweight to the grief he had carried for so long. It was proof that even after devastation, life can offer tenderness, joy, and meaning. Through love, fatherhood, and advocacy, hope returned to Pierce Brosnan's life, not as a sudden salvation, but as a steady, enduring presence. It grew quietly, like light through clouds, giving him a renewed sense of purpose, a renewed sense of home. The man who had once stood at the edges of despair now stood surrounded by family, grounded by partnership, and committed to leaving the world slightly better than he found it. And in that space he discovered the simple, profound truth that even after the deepest heartbreak, life continues, and love continues too. Even after enduring heartbreak that could have defined a lifetime, Pierce Brosnan emerged not only as a survivor but as a man whose story carries resonance far beyond the screen. His life is a mosaic of triumphs and tragedies, love and loss, and the tenderness with which he has navigated both has shaped the legacy he leaves behind. For audiences, his presence has always been more than a familiar face in a film. It is the steady rhythm of someone who embodies resilience, warmth, and the quiet courage of enduring hardship without losing grace. On screen, Pierce remains forever linked to his portrayal of James Bond from 1995 to 2002. The role brought global recognition, yet it never overshadowed the humanity beneath the icon. Audiences connected not just to the suave elegance or the thrilling adventures, but to the subtle vulnerability he brought to every scene. The flicker of humor, the undercurrent of doubt, the softness that made even a spy's life feel palpably human. It is this ability to blend charm, humor, and depth that continues to make his work enduringly relevant. Beyond Bond, Pierce's performances in films like The Matador, for which he earned a Golden Globe nomination in 2005, demonstrated a willingness to explore complexity, humor, and emotional fragility. His choices reflect a career defined not solely by celebrity, but by a subtle insistence on authenticity. Every role, every performance carried echoes of the man whose private life had endured immense loss and who had learned to channel that vulnerability into his craft. His legacy is as much about the courage to keep creating as it is about the characters he brought to life. Off-screen, his story resonates even more profoundly. Pierce's personal journey, the widowhood, the loss of a daughter, the struggle to support a stepson, imbues his life with a tenderness that audiences sense in his interviews, appearances, and charitable work. His marriage to Keely Shea Smith, the raising of their sons Dylan and Paris, and his advocacy for women's health and cancer awareness are all parts of a legacy that is deeply human, extending beyond cinematic achievement. It is the story of a man who, having known the weight of grief, chose to transform it into love, care, and purpose. This legacy is not defined by perfection. It is marked by resilience, the quiet endurance of a man who has carried both sorrow and hope with equal commitment. It is felt in the way he shows up for his family, in the consistency with which he has balanced career and home life, and in the gentleness he extends to causes shaped by personal loss. The tenderness of witnessing him navigate public life while honoring private grief has left an indelible impression on those who admire him. For millions around the world, Pierce Brosnan's life is a reminder that strength is not measured by the absence of hardship, but by the willingness to continue loving, to continue creating, and to continue giving after suffering has carved its mark. His story is a living testament to the endurance of the human spirit, the power of connection, and the quiet beauty of a life rebuilt on hope. In the end, his legacy is both intimate and universal. It is the courage to carry on, the devotion to family, and the commitment to using personal pain as a bridge toward empathy and change. The world remembers him not just for the roles he played, but for the heart he carried through each one, and the life he continues to live with tenderness, dignity, and unwavering humanity. Pierce Brosnan's life has been marked by heartbreak that could have silenced a lesser spirit, the loss of Cassandra Harris, the grief of losing his daughter Charlotte, and the struggles of his stepson Christopher, are chapters no one should have to endure. Yet Pierce carried each sorrow with a quiet dignity, balancing public life with private pain, offering love and stability to his family even when his own heart ached. Through it all, he found renewal. His marriage to Keely Shea Smith became a source of healing, and together they built a home filled with laughter, trust, and two sons, Dylan and Paris. Pierce's advocacy for women's health and cancer awareness reflects not just personal tragedy, but a desire to turn grief into purpose, to honor those lost by giving back in tangible ways. His story is a testament to the endurance of the human spirit, the transformative power of love, and the resilience that allows life to bloom again after profound loss. It reminds us that even in the depths of sorrow, hope can take root, and hearts can heal. For more emotional stories, check out this video.